Well, we're talking about the metaphor throughout July of a child. It's very appropriate that we do that in July because we have Vacation Bible School in July when we celebrate 300 children being here. And did we say we needed volunteers? I think that was announced. I just want to reemphasize that. A wonderful way to sort of see in concrete detail what we're talking about on Sunday morning. And if you volunteer, in the words of Jesus, great will your reward be in heaven. Perhaps a paraphrase, but you know what I mean. So please be attentive to sign up if you would, please. Let us pray. Lord our God, on this joyous day, please give a portion of your Spirit into the words about to be spoken and heard, into that which will be thought and felt, so that in all way we honor the living and the loving Christ in our midst. Amen. 2-year-old Jacob was talking to his mother about the upcoming baptism of his brand new baby brother, Jared. In particular, he wanted to know where Jesus lived. Well, Jacob, Jesus lives up in heaven, and the mother pointed upward. So Jacob thought about that. Is Jesus coming to the baptism tomorrow? Mother said yes. Good, Jacob said. He can bring the balloon I lost. Well, the mother thought about that. A little later, she said slyly, and what color was the balloon? Didn't think that she would replace it. Jacob replied, you'll see tomorrow. Hence, a child's spirit, right? A child is born naturally with a sense of optimism, of hope, of expectancy. All the world is filled with bright balloons. You lose one, Jesus will bring it tomorrow. No problem, no muss, no fuss. It's a wonderful world. Where is it as we grow older that we lose that childlike sense of balloons, of expectancy? Is it when we've seen dreams die, or relationships break, or hopes dashed, or jobs lost? We see balloons pop, and we're concerned that they will keep popping on the thorns of life. One poet said, I fall upon the thorns of life, I bleed. And then we start thinking every day there'll be some thorns that are going to hurt us, and we start focusing upon the thorns instead of upon the hope and the beauty and the color and the balloons. We become too old too fast. And that was one of the neat things about Jesus, is one of the neat things about Jesus. He never lost that childlike sense of expectancy. In any and all situations, Jesus had this marvelous way of instilling boundless optimism and hope. And the story of Jairus' daughter being resurrected, raised today, is a prime example of Jesus' unbridled optimism. Here's a little bit of background about the story. Jairus is the leader of the synagogue, a very respected man in the community. His little girl, 12-year-old daughter, sick. And it gets worse. Fever increases. She loses weight, energy, becomes listless. He's concerned. He tries everything. And then he does that which is socially unacceptable. He goes to Jesus. Socially unacceptable because the religious leaders, Pharisees and etc., did not like Jesus. And now here is one of their own, a religious leader, synagogue leader, going to him. But Jairus didn't care. So desperate was he needed to seek this itinerant preacher, healer, seek help. So he goes and explains the situation, and he agrees, Jesus does, to go with him. Now you might wonder, as I do, why didn't Jesus, if he was under time constraint, which he was, why didn't he do what he did for the Roman centurion slave, you know? He said, okay, your slave's well. And it was long distance healing. No muss, no fuss. But Jesus agrees to walk with Jairus, maybe because he wants to get acquainted with him, wants to have a conversation, answer questions, ask questions of his own. Maybe he wanted to use this as a teaching moment, an opportunity for Jairus to learn and to grow in faith. Well, for whatever reason, they're walking along, And then the news comes. Pretty harsh news. Jairus, your daughter is dead. Don't bother Jesus anymore. And how would you think he accepted that news? I would have to think that his knees buckled, he fell to the ground. Devastating news. That is the occasion for Jesus to say one of two outrageous things, out of the mind things for an adult to say. Here is Jairus, having just got the news that his daughter is dead. Jesus says to him, "Do not fear, only believe." Now, think of that context. Do not fear, only believe. That's what 2-year-old Jacob would say. Don't fear. Jesus bring balloon tomorrow. Do not fear, only believe. Hope, have faith. Why would Jesus say something? How could Jesus say something like that? Because someone that says something like that is either A, a nut, as Barney Fife would say, or B, he knows something that we don't. Right now, the only thing that we can think of on the outside in a story like this is that he is he's a 32-year-old sounding like a 2-year-old. Jack Canfield, who was one of the founders of the Chicken Soup for the Soul books, tells of a time when he is going home and stops off at a park to see a Little League game. And he goes up to the dugout along the first baseline, and he asks what the score is. And he said, and one of the kids says, "We're behind 14-0. Jack asked, "Well, you don't look too discouraged." "Why should we be discouraged? We haven't got to bat yet." Unbridled optimism. Well, no problem. We get up to bat, we'll get some hits. We'll score some runs. We'll go around the bases. We'll get ahead. But for those of us who have been playing the game quite a bit, we know that 14-0 is pretty big. We know that we've lost games before. We assume that we're going to lose again. Here's the daughter dead. And Jesus says, "Don't fear, only believe." What does he know that we don't? Well, they go on. They continue walking, and at least Jairus must think, well, he didn't turn me away. He's still going with me. And they walk and they come closer, and as they approach the village, they hear some wailing, some loud laments going up. Those laments came from an interesting phenomenon they had back then called professional mourners. If you were a well-to-do family or respected family, either you or some friends could hire people to go and mourn, usually in a very loud way. In a sense, that is sort of an unusual custom, an odd custom. Like Bill and Bob are professional mourners. They're walking down the road. "Hey, Bob, boy, the Jerusalem Cardinals really pulled it out in the 9th inning last night, didn't they?" "Yeah, oh, I didn't know they would ever be able to do that." "Yeah, me either." "Oh, here's the house. Ready? Okay." "Ah!" Get the idea? Think how crazy that is? But that's what they did. It's sort of like sending flowers, only louder. That was their custom. And so here, Jairus and Jesus and the entourage are walking, and they hear Bill and Bob and company wailing and lamenting, and suddenly the fears come back to Jairus. And his knees are starting to buckle again. The text doesn't say it, but you just assume that Jesus puts an arm around him, helps him go. Go closer. Go into finally the house where there's all sorts of chaos. The professional mourners are wailing, and then they see the wife and the other kids come up and hug Jairus, and they're crying, consoling each other. And in the midst of this chaos, this confusion, Jesus says, crazy thing number 2. He says, "Don't mourn. She's not dead. She's just sleeping." No doubt there was some silence, stunned silence at that. Then it says, the text does, they laughed. And it's not just a ha, but long, prolonged laughter. Bill and Bob and the other professional mourners know dead. And that woman, that girl is dead. Room temperature, dead in a mackerel, dead in a hammer, dead. So there was this laughter, the laughter. That is something, don't mourn, she's not dead. That's something a kid would say. A child who does not know death to someone who is dead just is sleeping. A child only sees the live part of another person. A mother took her 6-year-old daughter to a medical clinic. There was a crowded waiting room, and as they were sitting there, an older boy with piercings in his nose and lips and ears all over the place, chains and a big long snake tattoo all the way down his arm, sits down next to the little girl. The mother is a bit nervous. To her amazement and shock, the little girl turns to the boy and says, "Why do you wear all those things? Does it hurt? Why do you have a drawing of a snake on your arm?" Now the mother is really squirming. But the boy smiles softly, answers every question. They even start talking, have a conversation, the girl and the boy do. Finally, the mother pulls out a storybook that she brought for her child, and as she reads, she notes that the older, tough-looking kid has his eyes closed and is listening right along. Afterward, she reflected, the mom did, that I saw a scary-looking kid. My daughter saw a possible friend. I saw tattoos and scary stuff. My daughter saw a person. The daughter was incapable of seeing the dead parts of the person, only the live parts. Jesus looks at the girl laid out in Jairus' house, and he doesn't see a dead girl. He sees only the possibility for life. How can a 32-year-old man say what a 2-year-old boy would say? What does he know that we don't? Well, I reflected a lot on that very question. How can he say those two things that you see on the screen? How can he say that? And I think I came up with an answer. Long time ago, my son Cameron was in a Tiger Cub Scout meeting. And so I'm there. He's about 7 or 8, something like that. And the leader asked all the boys, "Who do you know is happy and smiling all the time?" And Cameron shot up his hand and said, "Daddy, my daddy is happy and smiling all the time." And I have to say, I was shocked. Because, friends, this is a confession of your pastor. I am not happy and smiling all the time. Golf course especially, you know that, but that's another story. I'm not happy and smiling all the time. Sometimes I'll come home from work stressed and tired. And come on, folks, there's a lot of stress and fatigue when you only work 1 day a week. That is a joke, okay? Make sure the video camera knows it. But you see, my son was incapable of seeing the dead parts of me. He only saw what a child could see in a parent, all the happy and the smiling times. Jesus saw only what a child could see in his Father. He knew his Father intimately to be loving, gracious, forgiving, compassionate, just-filled, dependable, and above all, powerful. That's what he knew. He knew all of that about his Father, and so he knew that whatever situation he found himself in with human pain, that was only an opportunity for the Father to be active, to pull off a miracle, to do something great. That does not mean that there will not be suffering or death in our lives, but it does mean if the Father is as Jesus says the Father is, that those are opportunities only for God to pull out something that is amazing, that is astounding. And So only because Jesus knew that about the Father and was incapable of seeing anything else with the Father, only because of that could he go over and take the girl by the hand and say, "My child, arise." He did not raise up that girl. The Father did. Only because Jesus was incapable of seeing anything else in the Father but love and power, only because of that could Jesus give himself up to the cross and into the grave, because he knew that he could not raise himself, but he knew his Father was more than capable of flecking that stone away as if it were a pebble and saying, "My son, arise." He knew that either in a dark, quiet, shrouded tomb or in a chaotic room of mourners, his Father was able to turn today's tears into tomorrow's laughter. He knew that his Father would never let death, fear, and pain have the last word. He bet his life on it. Who do you and I bet our life on? Who? Are you willing, with whatever pain you brought into this sanctuary today, be able to go out trusting that God is who Jesus said He is? Can you give this powerful God your fears? Can you give to Him all of those things that make you think that balloons pop? Can you? Well, if you bet your life on such a God, you better be able to do what Jesus did. Act like it. Act like it. Jesus put Himself in an avenue, in a place where He could be ridiculed, right? But God came through because Jesus knows God comes through. Where can you put yourself in a risky situation with your fear? Where can you embody that same hope and that optimism of Jesus in the situation that's scary to you now? You go out that door and you do what Jesus would do in that situation, and you just wait for the power of the Father to be revealed to you. You probably know the old classic story of that Texas town that was caught in a drought. And finally, out of desperation, all the townspeople go into the middle of the dusty street, start praying all day. Eventually, storm clouds arise on the horizon. After a while, there's a downpour. All the people scatter for cover except one little boy who takes out the umbrella, opens it up, looks upward, and smiles. If you need rain in your life right now, pray and take an umbrella. If you need sunshine in your life right now, you pray like Jesus would pray and bring some sunscreen. Friends, do not fear. Do not mourn. For this is our Father's world, and it is a beautiful world. Pray with me.